today, I want to talk about marriage. I want to talk about marriage. So if you're married today, or if you're thinking about married, or maybe thinking you might be married one day, or if you have married friends, this is going to give you language to come alongside of them as well. I want to share with you some of the conversations that I find myself coming back to again and again with married couples. And I know that you already know this, so I'm preaching to the choir here. You already know this, but having a thriving marriage isn't something you just drift into. No one's ever accidentally stumbled into having a thriving marriage. It takes focus and intention. You choose to have a thriving marriage. And my guess is that almost every single one of you, you've seen a marriage fall apart. May have been your own at some point in the past. Might have been your parents. It may have been a friend's. And I shared with you a few weeks ago that the average marriage now in America lasts 8 years. And then this one's really heartbreaking. Over 200,000 marriages will end before their second anniversary. And this makes, when you consider these stats and when you consider the personal stories that you have of seeing people's marriages not go so great, this all makes marriage sound like it's kind of a big gamble, doesn't it? Like it's a roll of the dice. You really don't know what you're gonna get. And here, what I want to tell you today is that marriage doesn't have to be a gamble. Marriage doesn't have to be a roll of the dice. I don't want you to be average in your marriage. I don't want to be average in mine. I don't want us to settle for being one of the statistics. We want marriages that thrive. And I want to unpack, for just a moment, a statement in which Jesus speaks about marriage. And I referenced it last week, but I want to come back to it and look at it in more detail for a few minutes because Jesus tells us how to ensure that our marriages aren't just a big giant roll of the dice, but can actually thrive. So I'd love for you to see this. It's in Matthew chapter 19, if you have a Bible. And if you don't, there's some at the seats around you. If you're at one of our campuses, you get there on your mobile device. If you're watching online, just get there. I want you to see this. Matthew chapter 19, page 749. If you're using the Bibles at your seats. And as you're turning there, let me give you a little bit of context real quick. Marriage and divorce was a topic that came up often in the first century world. And there was a moment that some Jewish leaders tried to trap Jesus in a conversation about divorce and marriage. And they approached Jesus, and this is the question that they approach him with. Look at verse 3, Matthew 19, verse 3. Some Pharisees, that's religious leaders. That was a group of religious leaders of the day. Some Pharisees came to Jesus and tried to trap him with this question. Here's what they asked him. Should a man be allowed to divorce his wife for just any reason? Now just pause for a second. It's an interesting question, and not unlike today, divorce happened for lots of different reasons, and it was incredibly easy for a man to divorce his wife. Conveniently for the men, by the way. It wasn't easy for a woman. She couldn't divorce her husband. A man could divorce his wife, and it was real easy to do. All he needed to do was wake up in the morning and hand her a notice of divorce, and it was done. That's literally all he needed to do. In fact, there's actually one document from the first century in that time period that stated that it was a legitimate reason to divorce your wife if she over-salted your food. Some of you be in trouble. I gotta tell you this, one time, our first year of marriage, Jenny, she told me I could share this because some of y'all gonna be anxious. When we got invited to come up here to LCBC. We were like, we got the job offered and I was gonna come up and we were gonna move up here. We were so excited. So I came home that night and Jenny made this nice dinner. She baked her first apple pie from scratch. I took one bite. It was the worst thing I've ever had in my life. Worst thing I've ever had in my life. Like right now, I've got trauma. It's coming up. So I'm like, what did you do to this? How did you violate this pie? What did you do? And she told me the recipe. She put a cup of salt instead of a cup of sugar. Hundreds of deer were flocking to our home just to lick that thing. And see, if we're in the first century, she's gone, right? That's how stupid it was in the first century, kind of what was going on. And I want you to listen how Jesus responds to this. Look at his response. He says, haven't you read the scriptures? Now, who's he talking to? He's talking to religious leaders. See, we get snarky Jesus right now. I love snarky Jesus. It's like he's being a little smart. He's talking to religious leaders. It's like, have you read the Bible? You ever read the Bible? And then he goes on. Jesus replied, he goes, well, because if you had, they record that from the beginning, God made male and female. It's like he's talking to them like they're third graders, like you have male and female. Are we tracking? All right, let's keep going. And he said, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife. And the two are united into one. Since they are no longer two, but what? One, let no one split apart what God has joined together. Let's unpack this for a second. See, Jesus comes along and throws a bomb in this whole system right now. He throws a bomb in the whole sort of way of thinking about it. He's saying that, look, if you're asking what the minimum threshold is for walking out on your spouse, you've already lost. If you're asking what the minimum threshold is for walking out on your spouse, you've already missed the vision that God has for marriage and what could be and its intent for our lives. And he mentions a phrase that we talked a little bit about last week that I just want to go a little bit deeper in today, a little bit further on today. He says that marriage joins us with our spouse and we are made one. See, Jesus elevates marriage. It is so much more than just a romantic relationship. It's way more than that. It is so much more than just a relationship to help you discover your own personal fulfillment in life. So much more than that. It is the joining of a husband and his wife where you and your spouse are exclusively, legally, emotionally, economically, and sexually one. I used this illustration last week and I just said, look, I mean, it's kind of like that word joined. It actually carries with it the idea of being glued together. That's the word picture behind it. And we looked at plywood last week and just how individual, I don't know if you can see this or not, but this is made up of individual pieces of chipped wood here. And so with you make these pieces of plywood board or whatever, you bring these individual pieces of wood are brought together with this strong binding glue and then put under intense heat. They're put through a machine that puts intense heat and pressure on it so that what went in as individual pieces comes out on the other side as what? One. Something new. Don't miss this. It is the heat and pressure that makes it one. Now, here's why I want to make sure that's clear. See, one of the reasons I want to take a second and point that out is because every now and then I'll hear married couples who get into seasons where the tension and frustration, seasons of tension and frustration, and they will act as if it shouldn't be happening. Like they're shocked. I've actually heard something like this before. Well, if it's love, it shouldn't be this difficult. If it's love, it shouldn't be this hard. Who said that? Actually, if it's love, it might be harder than anything else because love sticks it out. And that's hard. In fact, when the Apostle Paul, a couple of decades later, is trying to work out the implications of Jesus' words here, he writes a letter to Ephesians and he makes one of the most important statements in all of the New Testament related to marriage. This is what he says. He says this in Ephesians. He says, for husbands, you want to know what it means to live as one, to follow through what Jesus is talking about here with marriage? This means love your wives. Okay, got it, Paul. How do I do that? Well, you love her just as Christ loved the church. Okay, Paul, and how did Christ love the church? He gave up his life for her. It's a pretty high bar. To make her holy and clean. Now, this principle here can be extrapolated to both spouses. Love your spouse as Christ loved the church. How did he love? He sacrificed. Love sacrifices. Love lays down its own desires for the good of the other. And here's why this is so important to point out. When two autonomous people, two individuals, do the work of becoming joined together as one in marriage, you should expect conflict. It's not a sign that things are off. It might be a sign that you're actually being joined together and trying to live as one. Because why should you expect conflict? Because you married a man. And we're idiots. You married a woman, and they can be a mess sometimes. And here's my point. You married another broken, sinful, flawed human. They will oversalt and burn your food. And given enough time, they'll burn your trust. And you'll do the same to them. Guys, listen, man. Marriage doesn't create the worst parts of us. marriage exposes them. Like a bridge that has small fractures that may not be noticeable under normal conditions, but then when a loaded down semi-truck drives onto that bridge and parks, and the weight of that truck now exposes some of the fractures that were there all along. Marriage is that pressure and that weight. Sometimes it just exposes it. Man, the first year of marriage for Jenny and I, it was hard. It was really hard. It was really hard. I share that because I just want to normalize that. It's not always easy. And it was a hard year for us. You know why? Because my fractures were being exposed. My selfishness, the fractures in my character were being exposed. I didn't have to see them before that. Now when you live as one, you got to see them. You got to face them. And you want to know what I wanted to do more than anything else when I had the flaws of my character, the fractures in my life, the sinfulness of my own selfishness. You know what I wanted to do when I had to face that? I wanted to do what you want to do when you have to face your own stuff. I wanted to do what 200,000 people apparently do in the first 2 years. I wanted to run. Because that doesn't feel good. Love isn't supposed to be this difficult. I wish someone would have grabbed me by the shoulders and said, Jason, love's not the issue. You're difficult. And you're having to face that now. See, this is the sacred, I'm saying this in an inspiring way. This is the sacred potential of a God-centered marriage. This is what it can do for you, what it can do for me, that if we will do the hard work of being joined to our spouse and working towards being one, that relationship can be the weight that shows us the fractures in our life that God wants to fix, that God wants to heal, that God wants to renew, or as Paul said it all those years ago, to make us holy. Now, that's kind of a weird word. We don't use that word a lot. You know what holy just means? It means set apart, different. It means to be made more and more into the image of who God made us to be. Marriage can have that effect. And Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, gives us a vision for marriage and its intent. It is so much better than just personal fulfillment and my own happiness. It's to be joined as one, made more into the image of our God. And do you want to know where oneness starts? The starting point of all this, where that kind of intimacy that we want, the bond that we desire and that connection brings. I'll tell you where it starts. Jesus talks about it, and let me just sum it up with this principle right here. We strengthen intimacy through exclusivity. Now, I'm gonna unpack this, but this is the whole big idea. We strengthen intimacy through exclusivity. I want you to just consider for a moment what Jesus said was the starting point of intimacy and oneness with our spouse. Do you remember what he said in that passage we just read? Let's bring it up. This explains why a man, here it is, leaves his father and mother. And then what? And then is joined to his wife, becomes one, experiences that oneness. When you marry your spouse, you are leaving one life behind, and you are starting another one, a new one. You are elevating the relationship with your spouse above every other relationship you have. That's what Jesus says, that's the key. That's the key. The image I want you to think of here is that when you marry someone, you are putting a fence. I want you to just imagine you're putting a fence around your relationship now, just between you two. And there are certain things now that stay between you and your spouse. They stay in the fence. They don't get out because you protect that. And there's certain things on the outside you don't let in anymore. They could come between you and your spouse. You don't let those things in. Guys, I see young couples do this a lot. They get married and not much changes. Nothing got left, but everything should change. No fences are drawn. Because of that, intimacy wanes. And so let me just make this real practical. I'm gonna get very, very practical. See, once we get married, the dynamics of our relationship with friends changes. Let's talk about friends for a second. How does it change? Well, you don't talk about your wife in critical ways to the guys. That's in the fence, that stays in the fence. It's between you and your spouse. You don't put down your husband to your girlfriends. That's within the fence. You draw a fence around your marriage, and if there's conflict and issues that need addressed, you handle it with each other. I'm not saying there's not a place to have godly people around you. That's not what I'm saying at all, man. You know how much I believe in the power of friendships and relationships and connections and groups here at our church. And there's value in having people who can give us godly perspective and help us process. But here's the principle, if you need a kind of a principle. If you haven't already talked to your spouse about it, don't talk to someone else about it. Start there, within the fence. And the truth is that we oftentimes hide behind processing. I'm just processing as an excuse to just gripe about our spouse and look for affirmation that we're on the right side. Not that I've ever done that. You know what drawing a fence means? Related to your friends? It means, it also means that the time that we spend with our friends may shift. Your spouse shouldn't feel like they have to compete with your friends for time. We don't ditch friends, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they just don't get first priority anymore. That's all I'm saying. Jenny, this weekend, right now, Jenny's out of town with some girlfriends. Like, we're not gonna ditch friends. No, man, I want that. I love that for her. I want her invested in other people's lives and all that. But drawing a fence means that we talked about it. She didn't just say, hey, I'm out, I'll see you later. We talked about it. She prioritized, she checked in with me. We meant on Friday of this week, we prioritized time together knowing that she would be gone. That's just drawing a fence, guys. It's not complicated. Intimacy is built through exclusivity. It's us. We draw a fence now around relationships, but not just with friends, with family too. This is gonna be the fun part. See, Jesus was specific on this one. I mean, he said that intimacy and oneness starts with leaving father and mother, leaving home, some translations say. I don't need to state this any more strongly than Jesus did here. The two are tied together. You see that? Leaving behind the relational dynamics that you've had with your mom and dad, brother, sister, home is critically tied to your ability to be joined to your spouse, to live as one now. And I've seen too many couples over the years get married but not leave home. I'm not talking about physically, left home a long time ago. I'm not talking about geographically, they might live on different sides of the country. I mean leaving home emotionally, relationally, and giving themselves exclusively to their spouse. What does that look like? To leave home? Well, a couple thoughts. First, you don't process with your mom or dad personal things that you haven't talked about with your spouse. Just make that a line in the sand for you. I remember early on in our marriage, Jenny was talking to a family member of mine, and this family member told Jenny about something very personal related to me that Jenny didn't even know about. How do you think that made her feel? Not exclusive, excluded. And that's on me. That's me not drawing a fence. Leaving home looks like you don't protect your parents and family over your spouse. You don't take it personal when your spouse points out something in your family that may not be the healthiest. Leaving home means if your family asks you about holiday plans, that's coming, get ready. You say, I'll have to talk to, fill in your spouse's name first. See, when you get married, man, your spouse is now your first family. They're your first family. And it is okay to prioritize your first family. Exclusivity strengthens intimacy and oneness. And too many couples struggle getting their marriage off the ground because they don't draw a fence, they don't leave home. And let me just talk real quick to parents. You know what Jesus is saying here? I'll tell you what Jesus is saying. Let them leave. Some of y'all want to grab your phone and get a screenshot and send it to your parents. Let them leave. Again, not physically. You've let them leave physically. And yet maybe you've kept them tied in ways that aren't being helpful to them to becoming one. When you guilt them for making their own choices about the holidays, that's you trying to keep them home. When you push for details about their marriage that they haven't even talked to each other about, you're keeping them home. When you subtly or not so subtly question or undercut their spouse, you're keeping them home. You wanna know what the greatest gift, the most God-honoring, according to Jesus at least here in this passage, the greatest gift that you can give any of your children who are married or are going to get married? Empower them. Tell them that you expect them now to leave home. That you expect their relationship with you to never look the same, because it shouldn't. I was at a wedding a few years ago and I heard a father do this publicly with his daughter and her new husband. He got up in front of everybody. Everybody was there, a couple hundred people, and he said this in front of everyone to be accountable to it. He said, "We are not your first family anymore." He said, "You are a new family unit now, and we lay aside our own agendas for you, and we want you to always prioritize each other over everything else now." And I remember hearing him say that and thinking, that is a wise man. That's a wise man. He just empowered them to follow through on everything Jesus said. It's the starting point of a healthy marriage. Intimacy is strengthened by exclusivity. And so let me ask you, married 1 year, married 60 years, doesn't matter, somewhere in between. How's the fence today around your marriage? Have you drawn a fence of exclusivity? Have you made it clear to your spouse that no other relationship is as important as the one that you have with them? Not your relationship with your extended family, not your relationship with your boss or your team at work. That's not gonna come between you. Not your relationship with your own kids. That won't come between you. Sidebar, you know the best way to love your kids? Prioritize the intimacy of your marriage. Your kids will thank you for that. The principle of exclusivity is that we're not gonna allow anything or anyone else to creep in between us. We're not gonna do anything to explicitly or implicitly communicate that our spouse has second place to anyone or anything else in our life. And listen, I feel real burdened to say this. I also know that many of you are here right now. That exclusivity, you're in a relationship or whatever, maybe you've been in a relationship in the past, and exclusivity and intimacy feel like they walked out of the marriage a long time ago. I understand. And you long for it, but it hasn't happened. And maybe you've drawn a fence, but it hasn't been reciprocated. And some of you have felt the sting of brokenness in marriage and the heartache that is on the other side of not being aligned with following Jesus in this way. And I've been thinking about you a lot this week, thinking about this message, and I just want to encourage you today. Jesus hasn't left your side. And I don't know if your spouse will ever open up their heart to God working in their life, but I feel specifically led to say this to you today. I don't know if God will ever open up their heart, but do not close your heart off. Don't close your heart off from what Jesus wants to do in you in the middle of it all. Because I want to remind you today that you follow the one who gave up his life in love for those who wouldn't love him back. And you follow a Savior who knows the sting of rejection in ways we never will and can comfort the brokenhearted. See, that's why Jesus is uniquely qualified to comfort the brokenhearted when we come to him, because he's experienced in ways much deeper than our own. That if you're a life changed by Christ, in your life, man, it's too late, Jay. This feels like it's too little, too late. Here's what I want to say, man. There's no shame in this. There is never shame with Jesus. There is only what will tomorrow be. Jesus can take care of our past, but he's saying, will you step with me into a new future? Will you step with me into a new day? I can forgive the past. I can change the future. And so today, Jesus is saying, man, would you respond to me today? Maybe you haven't drawn fences. Maybe you haven't created exclusivity and intimacy, but that can be different. It may be time today to have an honest conversation with Jesus, and maybe one with your spouse, and just humbly say that you haven't drawn a fence of exclusivity like Jesus talks about, but by his grace and power, you want to move in a new direction. that you wanna draw offense in order to strengthen the intimacy and oneness that God has designed for you. You do that, and I promise you, man, in a world where marriages feel like a roll of the dice, a giant gamble, your marriage will be a demonstration of God's power. And we live in a world right now, guys, you know this, that is starving. It is waiting to see marriages lived out the way that Jesus described here. Marriages that point to something better. People are looking for marriages that demonstrate what it looks like for two people to willingly lay down their own lives for each other, like Jesus did for us. People are looking for marriages that demonstrate what it looks like for two people to forgive each other, even when it's not deserved, like Jesus did for us. And people are looking for marriages that demonstrate what it looks like to remain faithful. Come hell or high water, man, remain faithful like Jesus did for us. Doesn't have to be a gamble. Doesn't have to be a roll of the dice. Jesus invites us into a new vision for marriage, one that is surrendered to him, where we fight for exclusivity and in turn experience intimacy at the deepest levels.